Like we start the gospel reading, the good news, and talking about divorce. That seems a little bit jarring, but we picked up in the middle of a passage. We picked up even in the middle of a larger teaching that Jesus is offering. It's what we collectively know as the Sermon on the Mount. That's chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew's Gospel. And within those chapters, it's where Jesus really emphasizes the core of his teachings that will be carried out in his ministry and in the ministries of those who shall follow him. As it is recorded there, it is the longest continuous teachings of Jesus within the New Testament. And it includes the Beatitudes, the blessed are they and the blessed are those. The Lord's Prayer is in there, and also the central tenets of Christian discipleship. It's where Jesus really synthesizes Jesus' teachings. If you want to know what Jesus found important, read Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And you will find it there. In the text that we read today, and what we want to center our thinking on today as we consider how God gives the growth and we consider this notion that we belong to Christ, it's important to note that Jesus is teaching a group of people, most of whom have a Jewish background or who are practicing Jews. And so he does a lot of teaching and talking about the law and what the law says and what the law can mean in this present age. And so what we have to understand as we go into this text and try to take ourselves back to the side of that hillside where Jesus is teaching the multitudes, we have to understand that the law of Moses governed all sectors of life for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people tried to use the law to govern the lives of other people who were not Jewish as well. Amen? I mean, that's what you do when you think you got it all, when you think you have the truth, when you think you have it all right, you start insisting that other people live it the way you want to live. See, there was no delineation between the sacred and the secular in Jewish society. If you could not wear it in the temple, the synagogue, or the public square, then you couldn't wear it at home. If you couldn't eat it and you couldn't touch it in the temple, the synagogue, or the public square, you couldn't eat it at home. The law covered all of your life. It told you everything that you could not do. And so in Jesus' teaching, there's a lot of mention of and juxtaposition against the law itself. And we see this throughout Jesus' teaching. And the beauty of Jesus the Christ is that he represents both a continuity of the law and a break with the law. What we have to understand as we go into this is if we only rely on the words on the page, we run the risk of becoming and doing exactly what Jesus chides the Pharisees and the scribes for doing. We become too legalistic and too focused on what we do or do not do versus paying stricter attention to how we live and how we love. Now, that's not about who you love, but it's about how you love. That's what Jesus is teaching here. Jesus does not put any emphasis on the who, he puts the emphasis on the how. And Jesus' reaction, y'all didn't like that part? Do I need to say it again? Would that help? But Jesus' reaction here is more against the distortions which the scribes and Pharisees have introduced into the law. They have added their perspectives and interpretations and made their ideas equal to what God spoke to Moses. But the kingdom proclaimed by Jesus presupposes a practice of justice, not legalism, not a formal justice, but a profound and a reasonable justice that is built upon and that is driven by compassion, first and foremost. See, it's always easier to make and to follow rules than it is to be committed to, It is always easier to make and to follow rules than it is to be committed and to share out of love. Our rules give us reasons, excuses, coverings, and ways out of loving people. When the rules determine if we love or how we love, then we're doing nothing more than sitting in judgment. And when we sit in judgment, we take the place that is reserved for God and God alone. And when you take God's place, you position yourself such that you now wish to be worshipped because of the stolen throne that you sit upon. You made yourself a false god. Guess what? You become an American Idol. When you sit in judgment, you become an American Idol. If you always wanted to be one, now you will. See, Jesus is not messing around. He knows he's on a mission. He knows there are many forces at work to undermine what he has been sent to do for all eternity. There is an urgency here. People need to know how to live, and they need to know how to love. They also need to know that they are loved and that they have love to give. Yes. See, when we know that we have love, and we know that we have love to give, yes, we have hope. And as long as we have hope, we can continue to inhale and exhale. As long as we have hope, we don't lash out and strike out at other people. As long as we have hope, we don't do things to demean and dismiss one another. As long as we have hope. But we have to know that we are loved and that we have love to give in order to exhibit and to experience that hope. See, the rules, the laws, the regulations, the book of grandma, the gospel according to the United Methodist Church, see, they all draw lines and create boxes. They make the world so small. Yes. They create right and wrong camps. They judge winners and losers. Well, let's don't forget that history is always written by the winners. The rules are always written by the winners. Where everyone in here may not feel like a winner today. Let's just be honest. Life may not look like you're winning right now. But here's what you can know. Here's what you can know with some hope is that you are and ever shall be more than a conqueror through Jesus Christ who loves you. And in your quest to be all that God has called you to be and to do, there comes a time when the rules and the regulations fail to provide the lifeline or the pathway that you need. And Jesus is trying to crack this open right here in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I've been on vacation. Ooh, yes. Y'all can tell when somebody ain't used to something, right? They just talk about it all the time. I mean, look at my new shoes. You must not have any in a while. Telltale sign, telltale sign. But I'm on vacation. See, I said it again. I discovered that I need something. I discovered that I need something. I discovered that I need a breakthrough. Come on. I need a breakthrough. Yeah. Breakthrough. A sudden, dramatic, and important discovery or development. Yeah, I need that. An instance of achieving success in a particular sphere or activity. Yeah, I need a breakthrough. Am I the only one? As we think about this text here from Matthew 5, and we think about our lives, and we think about what Jesus is trying to teach, and we think about what it is that we need to learn. See, we can spend our time talking about divorce or adultery, temptations, disappointments, and all that's wrong in the world. But is that going to help us get the breakthrough that we need? Is that really going to help us move from point A to point B? Or does that just help us to dig deeper into the hole that we've already gotten ourselves into? I mean, so what do you do when the enemy mounts an attack against you? Is talking about divorce and adultery going to help you with that? Well, I guess it is if they cheated on you, huh? Well, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But what do you do when you're ready to mount an attack against your enemy? What do you do? How do you respond when reality begins to cave in on you? How do you respond when you hurt someone you love and you don't feel that you have the tools or the wherewithal to fix the hurt that you have caused? Where is the power to withstand attacks that are unwarranted need a breakthrough today? I mean, when there is a breakdown, our way out is a breakthrough. When there is a breakup, our way out is a breakthrough. When there is a break-in, our way out is a breakthrough. See, breakthroughs requires effort, energy, fortitude, and faith. To get a breakthrough, you have to want it. You have to want to work at it, and you have to want to maintain it. Now, something else I noticed while I was on vacation was I watched the sermons that were preached by Dr. Larry and Pastor Alma and Brother Jamil. And what I noticed was that they did something that I don't usually do. Y'all been half-stepping. See? I found out. You found out you've been half-stepping. See, typically, like when I preach each Sunday, we read a scripture, I preach from that scripture, and that scripture alone. And y'all go. But I watched all three of them, and they went Genesis through Max every week. And y'all were yelling and hollering and going on. I said, oh, they've been half-stepping on the air. They're like, oh no, when I get back, we're going to do more than one scripture now. Now that I know they can handle it, amen. I mean, Earl, were you here? I mean, they went in. I mean, especially right over in there, because the camera's right there. You can hear them. Woo, hallelujah, amen. I mean, they went on and on. And I said, my God, that's the 8th scripture, and they're still with it. I give them one, and they look like they're dragging along. So, here we go. One scripture, a year and a half, one scripture a week. Y'all looking like you're worn out. They gave you 8 or 10 or 12, and you're yelping and going on. I said, they need to cut that out. So as I was thinking about this notion of we belong to Christ and God gives the growth, and this idea that I need a breakthrough, and I would imagine some of you need a breakthrough. My spirit took me back to Genesis chapter 2 and 3, where God is engaging Adam and Eve. And you may recall that God gave Adam and Eve everything they needed to exist, gave them everything they needed to be prosperous in and with creation. Their prosperity depended on them accessing everything available within the boundaries that God had assigned for them. And God only gave them one condition. One condition. God said, everything you see is yours, except that one tree right there. Everything else you see, it is here and it is yours for the taking. Everything except that tree right there. Now, what's the first thing the enemy brings to their attention? That tree right there. You know the story. See, sometimes your boundaries, limitations, weaknesses, urges, desires, sins, weight, or whatever you call them will come to you. You don't have to go looking for them. If you want it badly enough, it'll be delivered right to your doorstep. Thank you, Amazon. And what we do with what shows up is what moves us away from where and who God has called us to be. Keep in mind, I did not say that's what separates us from God. But it's what moves us away from where God would have us be, and it moves us away from who God would have us be. It's what's used to convince you that you are not a child of God. that you are not loved by God, that you're not saved by grace, that you're not worthy of being included, that who God made you is somehow wrong and unseemly. And the ways in which we name, engage, and release what moves us away from where and who God has called us to be is what brings about our need for restoration and deliverance. Does anybody need a breakthrough today? If we look at the text we read earlier, we'll see that Jesus is teaching and he is calling the people to go beyond legalism and loopholes. He is calling them to bring a higher ethic, a compassionate justice, and a deeper love to every situation and to every relationship. You can know what the law says and you can do it. That may be enough, but it may not be all you need to move forward. You can know what the loopholes are and you can exploit them and give the appearance that you are compliant, but is that righteousness? And is it going to help you move from where you are to where you need to be? Because we need strength and hope to wade through the mess, to get up above the mess, to get out of the mess, to get beyond the mess that we are in. That's if you're able to acknowledge that you're in a mess. Because sometimes our bodies give way to disease and ailments. Sometimes these bodies that we're in betray us. We find that we're racked with pain. Our sanity, our memory, our mobility are in question. And we recognize that we need a breakthrough. And there are times when those we've given everything to give nothing but grief and heartache in return. And to get a simple hello seems to be a strain. And all you want to do is just choke them and just... Oh, I'm sorry. Who need vacation? When feelings of loneliness, sadness, depression, hopelessness, and inadequacy overtake your heart and mind, beloved, you need a breakthrough. Yes. This gospel text here that we read, the rule makers were the rule breakers. Did you catch that? The rule makers were the rule breakers. And I believe ultimately what happens with Adam and Eve in the garden is likened unto a breakthrough. So I think we go all the way back to Adam and Eve to understand how to get a breakthrough. Because sure, they disobeyed God and they did exactly what they were commanded not to do. Does that sound familiar? But here's the thing. The breakthrough came when, as the text says, their eyes were open and they realized they were naked. Their eyes were open and they realized they were naked. This is when their breakthrough came. And here's how, and here's why, and here's what we need to hold. See, in the eyes of God, we are already and always naked. Already and always naked in the eyes of God. There's no spiritual Spanx to confuse God. There's no spiritual Mac to confuse God. There's no spiritual Brazilian weave to confuse God. There's no lace front, no Gucci, no handicaps, none of that in the eyes of God. Always and already naked. And when Adam and Eve realized they were naked, it was then that they realized their need to totally rely on God. The same is true for us. When we realize that we can't make it up, we can't put it up, we can't hide it up, it is what it is, then we can rely on God. if we're truly to experience the breakthrough that we say we need and we long for, then we have to acknowledge that we are bare before God. And when we realize that we are naked before God, and God sees all and God knows all, this is good. I don't want you to miss it. The story in Genesis says the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden. The man and his wife, Adam and Eve, heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden. Adam and Eve had disobeyed God, had done exactly what God said, do not do. But the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord in the garden. Beloved, just because you did not do everything the way you were told to do it does not mean that God has abandoned you. In fact, because you didn't do exactly what God commanded you to do, it's all the more reason for God to come nearer to you, so that you can hear the sound of God's voice. To hear God say that I created you in my image and in my likeness, that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, that you are mine, that I will not withhold any good thing from you if you just walk upright, that my word I have hidden in your heart so that you won't say, I am here with you, even to the end of the earth.
Amen.
See all that stuff that's in our head, all that stuff we're telling ourselves? Oh, I've done. Oh, I've said. Oh, I've been. Oh, I. Oh, I. Oh, I. Oh, I. Y'all sing that song? If you stop singing that song, you will hear the sound of the Lord coming near to you. Especially when you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You are not so powerful, so big, or so important that you get to decide what happens with God's love. You are not so big and so powerful and so important that you get to decide what happens with God's hope. That's God's business. Your job is to receive it, to share it, to live it, to receive it, to share it, to live it, to receive it, to share it, to live it. And that's what Jesus is trying to get the scribes and the Pharisees and those who are gathered there under his voice when he's teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. He's trying to get them to understand that. Yes, this is what the law says. And there's a greater understanding beyond what's on the page. Because it's really about how we love each other. And yeah, it's about how we love ourselves too. Because if you don't love yourself, you won't be loving anybody else. So let's get that right. Amen.